So welcome to AI-powered sprints, 2 to 3 times the results in half the time. Actually, it's probably something even bigger than that. I've run a couple sprints lately, and I'm just amazed at what you can do with AI. It's actually out of this world. And my initial start when I started this whole thing is saying, look, AI can't be creative. Me as a wonderful human being, I'm always going to be more creative than a computer. But in fact, that's not completely true. Um, so the goal behind this talk is my mission is to reach out to a lot of innovators by 2027, 1 million to be exact. Design sprints are a really, really cool tool, and they can be made a whole lot better with AI. And when they're better, faster, and easier, will help a lot more people. Now, a starting point. Can people raise their hands? Who knows what a design sprint is? 1, 2. Okay, we got 50-50. Okay, so let's start with a discussion what a design sprint. The original sprint method is from Jake Knapp. It's a powerful way to move things forward. They work because they're focused, time-based, and structured. There's lots of types and flavors of these things. The key stages are usually understand what's going on, define something, ideate, decide, prototype, and test. If you go into a bit more detail at the stages, there's different things that happen at different stages. So typically on the first day, we're making a map, figuring out where we're going to go. The second day, we're sketching solutions and going someplace else. The third day is about deciding what we're going to do. Fourth day is prototyping. The fifth day is testing and bringing stuff together. Now, God, that looked so new just a few years ago, and now it looks so incredibly old right now. But in fact, what there are is some amazing things that happen in this process, but there are also some issues that come up. The first issue is they're too often run to solve the wrong challenge. There's oftentimes a lack of focus on alignment, so it's hit or miss for the teams. There's time constraints, so we end up sitting there with a lot of obvious ideas. We have a lack of time to get feedback, so there's a selection bias. I don't know if anybody here has ever heard of the idea of soaking. Soaking is letting ideas sit and work their way out. There's no time to get ideas soaking. There is a lot of half-baked ideas, low fidelity, and weak action plans, and there's too much time needed. So if I look at all these criticisms and all these things that are going wrong, I said, why would somebody run a design sprint? And the reason is they are really good at generating results. And what you can do is it's not because there's something that's going wrong, you have to throw something out, but you can look at ways that you can improve what you're doing to make things work more effectively. And what I see is AI can solve almost all of these issues. There's first of all a possibility for deeper thinking about strategy, ideas, and idea assessment. It's not because AI is helping you think that you can't think deeply. You can think deeply with AI. You can get a lot more feedback. You not only get more ideas, but I'm going to show you in a minute, you actually get better ideas. You can cover more of the strategic issues. You can make idea iteration a lot easier. We can get high fidelity things. We can get stuff that looks good faster. You can make a website. I mean, these things where you can push a button, get a whole website in just a minute. It's truly amazing. And there's also the fact that you can go a lot faster with what's there. So let me start with a little bit of research. This is a bit of a personal deformation. Actually, I believe very strongly in evidence-based whatever I do. So if I'm going to do something, I want to make sure it's true. The first thing we have is this is sort of the downside for the human beings. Right now, if we look in terms of ability to create ideas, AI is beating approximately 99% of human beings. And the two ways that we tend to assess an idea is on one side, it's in terms of the value, which is there, which is that one over there. And what you see is that AI tends to offer ideas which are more value. There's a little tiny group of people that are actually outperforming AI. And then there's the question of novelty, which is how unique the ideas are. And there you see a little bit of group human beings that are outperforming. The second thing you see, and that's a big part of the ideation process, is not only just generating ideas, but evaluating ideas. And there was a good study run by Brigham Young University showing that, in fact, the AI is as good as human beings at evaluating the ideas. And it has the advantage where it's a whole lot faster and a whole lot more reliable than human beings are. Now, we actually did some research next to this, which is evaluating a lot of ideas. Our research, we covered a test where we generated 5,402 ideas, 4,662 designed by AI, and 740 by human beings. Now, what you can do is look at all different types of ideation methods. The first thing we tried was human beings all by themselves. Then we gave human beings ChatGPT 3.5. We gave them ChatGPT, and we gave them a little bit of help in terms of defining what they want to do. So actually defining the objectives more clearly. We had different types of ideation techniques, which you would use with human beings. For example, alternative views. Imagine you're Elon Musk generating this. Imagine you're Amazon doing this. We have different creative tools, De Bono 6 Thinking Hats, Scamper, all that kind of stuff. Creative combinations, which is combining stuff that doesn't naturally go together. And we have Triz, which is actually my favorite because it actually tends to deliver the best results. And we have all these ideas that we can put together. Now, what I see is an interesting thing is we can look at these results and their ability to be used in the design sprint in different ways. The first thing you can look at is the quality of the ideas. And what we do is we evaluate the quality of the ideas on two scales. One is, are the ideas meaningful? And secondly, are the ideas novel and interesting? And if you have those two things, you can have a perfect score, which is a 10, and the average scores are somewhere around a 5. And what you see is in terms of idea quality, in terms of what we're looking at here, is there is a difference between the human beings and the things that are done with different types of AI. But these are statistically significant, but they're not practically different. They're basically the same. AI, human beings generate ideas which are the same quality on average. Now, there's an important thing is this is on average. This is not the quality, the best ideas or the worst ideas. The second thing you can look at is how novel and different the ideas are. And there's something you can use, which is called cosine similarity, which measures the similarity of ideas. What you have is, for example, you have an idea which could be defined by a sentence. You'd say, this is a very happy person and this is a happy person. Those two things are pretty similar. An idea to do this, which is similar to that. And actually, your ideas get further and further away. So basically, when the ideas are very similar, the cosine similarity is high. When the ideas are different, the number is low. And if we look at those, what we'll see is, in fact, human beings outperform the AI in terms of novelty of ideas, in terms of variety of ideas. So you'd say, well, actually, what we have right now is we have human beings which are about the same as AI in terms of quality of ideas and better in terms of novelty. So we'd say, well, actually, all things considered, we should do everything with human beings. But in fact, there is another side of this, and that is if you look at the types of ideas we come together and types of ideas you want, does anybody really want 5,000 ideas to solve an innovation challenge? The answer is probably not. What you want is a few good ideas. So what we did is we took those 5,000 ideas and we rank ordered them from the very best to the very worst. And we drew a line, which is for the 95th percentile. And we said, how many ideas score above that point? And what you'll see is, in fact, there's a huge difference in terms of the number of best ideas. So what we're looking at here is human beings in the study that we ran here generate one top 5% idea approximately 1% of the time. When they use ChatGPT to help them, they get a little bit better. And when they use ChatGPT with a little bit of support, they get a little bit better too. And they get somewhere around twice as many top ideas. But what we're looking at is when we start looking at structured ideation, we see a whole lot more ideas, somewhere between 5 to 8 times more big ideas. The question, does this make sense to everybody? We're in a small enough group. If somebody wants to ask me a question, It's more fun. There's one other bit of research before I tell you how we put together the sprints, and that is some stuff that was done at the Harvard Business School, where they were looking at the impact of AI. Rick, I see you got a question there.
Yeah, just a very quick one, just on the past point, and that is, how do you decide how good of an idea is, and how is it decided?
That's a good question. In fact, the way that the ideas were ranked is the ranking is actually purchase intention times novelty. So how much is in this specific case, how much is the idea meaningful, and how new and different is it from other ideas? Does that make sense, Rick?
Yeah, it does. It requires judgment to make that. So it's the discernment factor of how good is the discerning factor to be able to differentiate it. That's all. Is that a human assessment, or is that based upon using AI?
We did it both ways. And what we found is, in fact, the numbers are the same. It's just a heck of a lot easier to evaluate 5,000 ideas with AI than it is with human beings. So what we ended up there was we did do the assignment. And in fact, the numbers tend to be fairly close together. You have a big grouping around the middle, which you don't have really exceptional ideas and you don't have really bad ideas. Sam, you had a question.
Yes, thanks. I'm wondering if you could say a little bit more about what the actual AI tools the humans were using to enable these results.
Okay, so the first one was human beings by themselves. That's pretty easy. The second one was human beings saying, look, you got ChatGPT on your desktop, use it. And they basically say, give me a few ideas to do this. In fact, AI is not very good when you give it a non-structured request. The next level up, which was the things that are here, was actually a very structured request. Say, we want an idea that does this, but doesn't do that. And when you do that, you actually get better ideas. I want a car that drives faster and safer. I want to make my wife happier and spend less money on her. Things that are contradictory and things that don't necessarily go together. Sure. And these were actually much more detailed ideation methods, something you might use in a brainstorming session. So, put on your critical hat, give me a few ideas. Do this, give me a few ideas. And actually what happens is AI works really well when you give it stimulus. Okay.
Thank you.
Cool. So there was a study that was done at the Harvard Business School, also around creativity. And they divided their consultants into two groups. They had their best consultants, the top half, and they had the bottom half. What they found is that everybody got better when they used AI. Everybody. But where you ended up, the biggest difference is within the lower group was actually getting more results than the people that were the better consultants. And in fact, what happens at the end of this is the performance level of both groups developing new ideas turned out to be approximately the same. So in fact, you have a leveling of everybody in your group, the best and the worst, all now produce at the same level. However, there is a issue there. And that is, they also looked at groups that were using AI for things that AI wasn't very good at. So things outside of the capabilities of AI. And in these cases, they were given case studies where there was a correct answer and an incorrect answer, but something where AI couldn't give you the correct answer. What they found is that people that weren't using AI were actually less likely to get things wrong. And the more you used AI, so this group used more than that one, the more likely you were to get things wrong. So basically, in a case where you use AI, there's a tendency for people to over rely on it and to make mistakes. And one of the things that happens is the AI is very good at convincing you that what you should do is choose the wrong thing. So what we see, and this is the thing that pulls together everything we're doing in terms of our design sprints, is it's not a question of humans or AI alone. There's going to be a situation where we're always going to work with AI. I don't think anybody that's in the design area right now nobody's not using AI anymore. What you find is that when humans and AI work together, they get better, but they make more mistakes. If you want to get really good results, what you need to use is a smart use of AI. And smart, it's about using predefined tools, knowledge on how to use the tools, and knowledge on how to interact with it. And there you get even better results and even less failures. So who are we? I'm Bryan. I'm joined with around 10 other people. We're on a mission to coach, train 1 million innovators by 2027. Everything we're doing is based around a few different principles. One is evidence-based. Two, it's about you working with innovation experts and building expertise. We have probably the world's largest AI for innovation toolkit, and we have a huge network of partners, so we are able to find somebody who can work in almost any area. The goal is better, faster innovation with keynotes, trainings, and sprints. Now I'll get on to the bit about design sprints and how we're going about this. So design sprints are changing, and they're changing quite a bit. Originally, you had a 5-day program. In the 5-day program, you mapped out your ideas, you built ideas, decided on the ideas, prototype, and tested it. A lot of people complain, saying 5 days is really hard to get people together. So people started compressing this down to a 4-day format. And the most popular 4-day format is the one from AJ Smart, where they added market assessment before the sprint, and they combined the mapping and sketching to day one, and then they put a debrief afterwards. Now, what we've done is we've gone one step further. We've kept the market assessment at the beginning. We've turned sketching into building ideas, because actually I think the crazy eights and a lot of the things that you do in a typical design sprint don't really generate the ideas that you want. So we have an AI turbocharged build session, and we pulled everything into 2 days. Then we did is we put in a break, because in fact, without a break, ideas don't have time to gestate. I see somebody in Flanders there. Roger, that was you. And then we added in a last bit, which we actually added in time to the design sprint, which is actually around pitching and a debrief. The way we get all this stuff to fit together is we have a toolkit, and that toolkit has things that you can use at each stage in the innovation process. And we don't replace the human expertise, but we try to augment it. We have a total of 259 tools and 6 apps. And we also have a series of data summarization tools, which are not available online right now. So this is what we have right now in terms of an AI sprint. We have a preparation phase, which is getting ready to do the sprint. We have align and building, which is the day one, which is figure out what you want to do, building some ideas. Day 2 is about extending those ideas and testing them. Then there's a break to soak those ideas, and there's the last bit about making it real. And what I'm going to do is go through this step by step and see if it makes sense. Now, Fritz, I'm waiting for questions from you. This is your expertise, man. Ask me questions. Tell me how this is different than what you're doing or similar to what you're doing.
So no, honestly, I'm more listening because we talked lately, and I don't know yet what you're in detail doing there. So I first digest, and I might come up with the questions afterwards. But
Okay,
you know,
perfect.
I'm a fan of and basically blending both experiences. So
Okay.
go on, and I might challenge you later. But
Okay.
so far, all good.
So the starting phase is the preparation phase. For me, this is the least sexy phase, but it's also the phase that has the most potential to make in a sprint a success or a failure. Before the age of AI, a good rule of thumb for me is for every day that we were together, I spent 1 week preparing for a sprint. So if I did a 5-day sprint, that means there was 5 weeks of preparation, maybe not 5 weeks full time, but there's 5 weeks of preparation and things coming together. Now we can do it less, but it's still probably the most important part of the sprint. And the time is usually, for me, around 4 hours right now. And what we do is we start out with step number 1 of this is a market assessment and a clarification of objectives. And what you see on the right-hand side of this probably won't make much sense, but in fact, this is all the AI tools that we have for this stage of the sprint. So then, in fact, there's a total of 35 tools, which go through and start with a business objective, go through and identify different things that you should be working on. The step number 2 of this is writing up a true north, which is trying to figure out where you want to go. Now, one of the things that's really interesting and counterintuitive for me right now, you would think that if you're prompting AI, a story is not going to help you very much. But in fact, a story will give you better results when you work with AI. A story also gives you much better results when you work with people. And a true north, which is the way we define an innovation objective, is about a story about what you want to do, the objectives, constraints, assets, and blockers. So we've done this. You're about 3 hours in. And then the last stage of this is we do some work on trying to figure out who the personas we're going to want to talk about in the sprint. And we make up a private GPT for the client, which is basically all this market assessment data that we've collected. We pull it together and we make it available as a central team resource. Rick, do you still have a question? I see you got your hand up still.
I'm okay.
All right, perfect. So step number 1, about a half day, getting things ready to go. Step number 2 is about align and build. Now, one of the things that I think we've done, which is really cool, is we've changed around the way we're doing the alignment. In fact, we're spending a lot more time on alignment than in a typical sprint. And I think it's the place that you can go wrong most easy. And what we start out with is a lightning demo, just like you do for ideation, but it's more about ideation, different types of deep thinking about where we want to go in terms of the sprint. What have we learned? What do we recommend? What are the questions to consider? And the goal here is to get some deep thinking on the right problem. And frankly, if you get the problem right, you've done half the work. The second stage we do is we go through and we look at the true north again, trying to detail that out after we've talked in the groups about where we're going, what have we learned. We get some AI feedback, we discuss, we decide, we put this together. And the last bit here, and this is the kind of cool bit, and the thing that's funny is the thing that people are most excited about in these sprints is the ideation from AI. But in fact, that's the part that's probably the easiest to do. But what we have is a mechanical creativity system. So the input is the true north. And then there's a series of prompts and it generates ideas. If you look what we do right now is we run through here, it's 58 different prompts that we ran in the last sprint, and it generates about 1,200 ideas. Now, 1,200 ideas in about 20 minutes. Now, what's important to remember is these are not bad ideas. These are typically better ideas than the people are generating. But there's a bit of an overload. And then what we have is a tool which actually goes through all those ideas. It reviews the ideas, analyzing what are the best ideas. It asks the user to review them individually and try to merge different ideas to come up with 10 top ideas. So we're now at the end of day one. What we've gone through is we said, look, where do we want to go? How do we clearly define this? Here's a bunch of ideas. And then the people are going through and trying to find those ideas and pull them together. Now, the last thing, I've got to go over here.
Bryan, I just have a quick question. In terms of, you emphasize the importance of defining the problem, but do you have tools that ask people, that question them as to whether it is the right, problem, seeing that people fail because they haven't defined? Do you have tools specifically for that process?
Yes, in fact, all of these tools here. So most of these tools are around defining your objectives and trying to identify what is working, what is not. And then what we have is in the stage where we're going through the feedback, actually there's a series of 10 prompts, which are actually individual feedback. Is the objective clear? Is the contradiction clear? Are there different ways to formulate the problem? So yes, there's all different types of AI feedback that's there. Does that answer the question there?
Yeah, it does in part. It's a question of experiencing it to know what it feels like to actually go through that process. I mean, the question I have is if you're completely off base, or how often does it really shift things to where people say, actually, we're not close to the challenge of the problem. This is what we need to focus on. So how often does it actually shift rather than refine things?
I think in my experience, very seldom does it shift the problem. What it does is it clarifies the problem and points you in a different direction. It also reformulates the problem so that you can define the problem differently. I mean, there's a lot of classic things that are there about problem definition. So basically, how you define the problem oftentimes defines how you will find the solution. So I think that's probably the biggest impact. So we've now ended the day. We got a bunch of ideas. And what we do is we start the next day with, extending the ideas that have been generated and trying to test out those ideas. And let me take you through that process step by step. So the first thing we do is we start out just like we did on the previous day with a demo on strategy. We're looking for a treasure demo. What are the best ideas? How can we improve them? We discuss, we decide, and here it's not AI that's doing the work. Here it's the human beings that are doing the work, and they have to synthesize and improve what is there. The next stage is when we identified a few different ideas, and this comes back to the question you're asking, what can AI do? I think AI is probably best suited to be a buddy in the process. So what we do here is we take the ideas, we try to clarify and focus them. And here we have a series of questions that we ask about the ideas to try and make sure the ideas are crystal clear, that delivering on a real job to be done, they're focused and they're easily understood for the people who have to build the prototype. Then what we do is we spend time on the prototype looking for high fidelity MVPs. Here is an example of something we did with Heinz. Heinz was making, in McDonald's, you've got these things where you can, get all the flavors of soda that you want. Heinz is introducing these things in restaurants where you can get all the flavors you want out of a machine. And what we're trying to do is demonstrate different types of flavors that could come out. And we use the AI to visualize those flavors. Unfortunately, couldn't make them, which kind of a bummer, but at least you can visualize it. And then we had human beings actually going and making it. The next stage, and this is for me something quite counterintuitive. The first time somebody talked to me about generating ideas with AI and then having AI evaluate those ideas, I thought I was in some sort of science fiction film. I said, how is this possible? How can it actually be useful in any shape or form? Have any of you seen this site called syntheticusers.com? It's truly amazing. Actually, I've done a series of demos with them, with clients, and we've compared the things that we've got in terms of real customer interviews and the interviews that we get from the synthetic users. And actually, the difference that comes up, the synthetic users don't get tired. You can ask them as many questions as you want, and they tend to be pretty insightful. The disadvantage here is it's relatively expensive, especially if you want to evaluate a lot of ideas. What we've done as part of our sprint process is actually we go through and typically generate somewhere between 6 and 12 personas before the testing is run, before we start the sprint. And then what we do is we use those personas to evaluate ideas. So in fact, we use them as part of the idea screening process, but we also use them as a way to get feedback on the process. So we'll say, look, tell me what this user would have talked about, or this user would have thought about the idea. Here, if you want, is a prompt you can use to do that. Basically, what it's asking is twofold, saying this is what our goal is. We say we want you to evaluate it. These are the types of people. And then what it will do is we'll give you individual feedback from each of those different people on all the ideas that are there. The next stage of the process is to stop. You got some ideas that have come together. You take a little bit of time off and you say, look, what we want you to do is take these ideas and do something with them, which is not AI based. We want you to go out. We want you to talk to human beings. We want you to get reactions. We want you to improve the ideas. And the first thing we do here is we give them time to think about what they're doing. Sometimes I think the faster you go, the behinder you get. This used to be up on my grandmother's wall when I was a kid. I never understood as a kid. Finally, as an adult, almost 50 years later, I finally understand this expression. And what you need to do is you need to realize ideas take time to grow, and you need to give them time to grow. So typically what we do this ideation phase on Monday, evaluation of the ideas on Tuesday, and then Wednesday and Thursday, we have people going out and talking to real consumers. What we do at that point in time, we have an AI tool which generates an interview guide, which is inspired by the MOM test, which, by the way, is, I think, the greatest market research book that's ever been written. We go through having iteration improving. We give people a tool, which is, for me, a really cool tool. I don't know about you, but it takes me a long time to write a 3 to 5 minute pitch. We've developed a tool where people fill in the blanks about the concept that they're talking about, the idea that they want to present to their colleagues. And it makes a 3 to 5 minute pitch in about a half hour or something like that. Then we have a pitch review tool, which allows them to get feedback on what they're going to present to their colleagues when they come back. So now we've gone through the process where we've figured out what we want to do. We've built some ideas. We've tested some ideas. We've talked to some humans about those ideas. We've gotten some real feedback. And the final day is the half day that we add is about making it real. And effectively what we're looking at here is we have a day which is feedback, update, and working together. So the start of the day is either, depending upon how many groups are working on things, if it's one group, we actually just do a general session where we have some experts providing feedback. If it's several groups working on a challenge, we do speed dating between the groups where they give each other feedback. Then they have an update and they have to remake the pitch. For us, this is a fantastic way because it forces people to make feedback quickly and go forward. We then go through to a series of decision-making processes and planning for the future. And like the other things that we had earlier, we have a series of prompts which are used to evaluate the feasibility of a business idea. Effectively, for me, the best question usually for business is not why is this a good idea, but why is this a bad idea? What are the risks with this idea? What are the things we have to cover? And then you go through in a planning process to come things together. What do we see right now? in action, we see approximately 2 to 3 times more results, but more good results in half the time. And the reason why the results are better is there's more thinking about strategy and more time for ideas assessment. There's more time for testing and more time for validation. There's bigger and better ideas. There's broader coverage of the strategic questions. There's more idea iteration. There's better MVPs. And we end the whole thing with a strong call to action. So what can you expect doing these type of events together? I just have a couple testimonials that come out. The first one was about adding depth to our strategic thinking. So the idea is it's not about the ideation part, but it's about helping us think together. And also they talked here about, the ability to validate hundreds of ideas in time where we would have done just a few as individuals. The next group is saying, look, you know what? We didn't have time for these long sprints. It got us past all the roadblocks we're facing, and it got us there faster and better. And the last group was saying, look, not only did we come up with a viable product idea, but we had a clear vision of what we wanted to do afterwards. So the question is, could you do this on your own? Of course you could. There's nothing stopping you. You just have to have a structure. You have to have a plan. You have to make it work together. What we offer is tools to make the process easier. What we have is in terms of an offer is typically between 15 and 30,000 euros based on the amount of prep work we need to do, the number of facilitators, and the number of experts. What's included is the market assessment before the sprint, alignment on objectives before the sprint, a 2-day sprint with up to 4 teams, tools for the whole process, advice for market validation, and a half-day pitch event with speed dating and final pitches. And an offer to you if you want. And I noticed that I didn't put this at the beginning of the talk, is we have a series of tools that are available. If you want, you can get, first of all, a copy of the presentation today. That's easy. But secondly, if you give some feedback, we'll give you a link to get some free stuff. The free stuff is a copy of my book, which I don't know how big of a deal that is for people. I'm sending this to everybody. Boom, boom, boom. You get a link to our AI for Innovation toolkit and updates as we build new stuff. Let me show you what this looks like. So there's a site which you can access. By the way, that's not the link. You have to fill in the evaluation form. You go there, you select, what is this thing you want to do? Is it alignment, building ideas, communicating, checking ideas, systematically improving? Select your stage, select your method, add your input, and basically what you'll get on the other side is a whole bunch of ideas that keep on popping out and run and run and run. Now, what I put together here is I think something kind of cool. The thing that comes up is somebody can talk to you about something, but unless you actually try it with your hands, it's very difficult to see how it works. So I've put together a mini sprint. It's got 4 out of the 265 tools. It's a fill in the blank. Basically, you just go through stage 1, stage 2, stage 3, stage 4, stage 5, stage 6, and you'll generate somewhere around 100 ideas for an innovation challenge. You'll evaluate those ideas. You'll write up concepts for those ideas. You'll do synthetic user testing, and you'll have something that fits together. And that was it. Okay, Fritz, tell me why this is a bad idea. Come on.
I don't believe it's a bad idea, and I think there's a huge problem in the things you said about timing and facilitation. I think it's still the biggest problem is in the problem phase, like in the part that I also worked together with you on the book. Because as you said, like the moment you really tackle the problem, you know who the user is, that it's really a problem, etc. Often enough, the solutions are way more obvious and you don't need as much support. But then often enough, also the sprint becomes less needed. That's what I often realize. Like if you really dig into the problem, then things are way more obvious. For sure, if you want more creative big things, which to at least on the mid-European side, people are not really aiming for now, at least corporates, they really concentrate on core business right now. I believe all the structure you add is a very good thing. Like I love that. You know me, I love structure, and all those structured tools really help people think and coming up with, even if it's only inspiration, to think a bit different or further than you usually do. I think that's a big leap forward. On the other side, if you add discussions, like you try to unbias all the creativity process, and then you add discussions. You set alignment first, and then you set discussions, which is a bit of a, like it always triggers me a bit. You also add bias, you add all the groupthink, etc. For me, it's more if you can make it happen to align information and not discuss, because then automatically you would bring in again the hippo thoughts and all those things. I don't know how you do it, but that was a word that triggered me at least. And the last thing where I might be a bit critical is I think there's a lot of contradicting research on synthetic users. I believe it's the way it goes. But so far, the synthetic user research, as far as I know, gives a lot of convincing thought, and I also it inspires to think further. But often enough, things that are not obvious because they weren't trained, the models, the LLMs weren't trained on new, really new stuff. They often overlook things that would be critical. So I think they can be very inspirational, but it doesn't take the burden of really talking to people. And you said there is this phase of 2 days where people should talk to people, but I would bring in more structure there. So if I know the organizations I work with, if I tell them now go out and do it, they wouldn't do it. Then they would just come back and say like, oh, but we talked to the synthetic users and that should be enough. But overall, I like it. I already have some ideas. We should talk again. So yeah, thanks for those, for the inspiration again.
Actually, I always like your comments, Fritz, because it always, forces me to think. But I think there's a false sense of security with the synthetic users. And in fact, it plays back oftentimes what you're expecting to be there, and it plays back the obvious stuff. And I think it comes back to that Harvard study that we were looking at the beginning. The problem that you have with AI can convince you wrong things are right. Unless you use your brain and you work along with it and you use it as a feedback tool, you'll be going in the wrong direction. But I think, the other thing that comes up for me is a bit of a sea change, because, for years and years, the hero of these creative processes where, who builds the most ideas. But in fact, I think the hero of the process now is actually who develops the best version of the problem and who's best at evaluating things. And you let the building the ideas bit a bit to the AI, and you take the things that it can't do, which is strategic alignment and idea evaluation, and you do it more effectively.
I'm with you on that. I think there's questions from Sam and Rick. That's why I'm holding back a bit.
Yeah, thanks. Hey, I had a question. If you could talk through, I'm really curious about the tactical orchestration of these sprints. Like, does everyone bring their own laptop and they have their own like ChatGPT accounts, and they're like cutting and pasting all these prompts and the responses back together? Like, I can just imagine like that being a real rodeo, trying to wrestle that process to the ground. So I'm curious about how you orchestrate this and get all of these stakeholders together, and just getting comfortable with all these diverse tools right out of the gate.
I see something from Anders here saying you can do a group chat in ChatGPT-4. I didn't know that was possible, which is kind of cool. I will look at that. And the answer to your question, Sam, is actually it depends. If you're doing this remotely, if you're doing a remote sprint, it's very easy to get people on their computers because that's the way they're interacting with the world. When you have 5 people around the table and you start having everybody type on the computers, you end up not talking to one another. And then it gets really kind of messed up. And the only way that I found around this is when you do this in person, you have to give them things on paper, old-fashioned paper, so they actually fill in stuff on paper, and that they can hand it and show it to each other. Because it's like in the restaurant, you're showing your wife this stuff, and nobody reads it. It's so logistically, I think it's actually easier to do a lot of this stuff remotely than it is in person. But I still think that there's a huge value of doing stuff in person. And one of the things that I've seen, which is actually quite cool, is doing parts of the sprint. So, for example, the alignment bit, doing it remotely, and then coming together maybe a week later, you do the ideation bit. So it doesn't have to be 5 days in a row. It could be 1 week something, a next Friday something, and then doing the pitch in person at the end.
Hybrid.
Yeah, hybrid.
Great, thank you.
Rick, I see you got a question mark.
Yes, I do indeed. I was wondering if you give this actually builds on what Sam was talking about, different aspects of the actual experience of it. But I just want to zoom in on your personas that you're using and how sophisticated they are, because I just quickly glanced at them. But one of the things I already do on using Max AI, I will often prompt it to give me, I love it, I like it, I hate it, whatever. And it generates all these responses to something. And then I look at the contrasting perspectives and use, well, how does it inspire me to think about how to respond? So, if you have conflicting personas, for example, between the pessimists and the optimists, between the marketer and the engineer, yada, yada, I'm just trying to get a feel for how those personas actually play out and are of value.
And I'd like to say that I was an expert at this, Rick, and I'm not.
Who is?
I'm learning as we go. I worked with a gentleman a while ago who actually created personas that had it was almost like the De Bono 6 thinking hats. And he said, look, we're going to create personas which have very different worldviews. One is very risk adverse, one is this way, one is this way. And we're going to let them, fight it out together. And I found that was a really interesting process. But I'm not there yet. So I wish I could give you a better answer. Maybe somebody else here has had some good experience.
Well, just to build on that, I mean, I was just in a conversation with somebody, and they were a specialist. I'm a generalist, and they wanted to zoom in on the narrow perspective. I wanted to take the big perspective. You had the thinkers and the doers nuking it out. So I think there's a lot of merit in thinking about how can you recreate those types of personas to actually allow somebody who hasn't got that disposition to understand somebody else's perspective. So if anybody here listening has anything up their sleeve about how to get to that space or moving that space, that would be great.
My personal point of view, and actually this is based on having done lots and lots of work with startups, is I find there's an incredible value in having somebody that can have a negative viewpoint. Because everybody's you rah rah, isn't this fantastic? Aren't we going out? Aren't we making the most amazing thing? And what I do find is interesting is when the AI is negative, they're not as upset as when it's a human being being negative, which is a really positive thing. So you can let the AI be the devil's advocate, and that works as a good solution.
And I was going to say, do you have a persona as the skeptic, the naysayer, the heretic? Or whatever.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. Kai, you had a question. I think you're still there.
Hi.
Yeah.
Hi, Bryan. Hi. Thank you for the great talk. So I think I might have missed it. So you said there can be, let's say, 2,000 ideas. How do you go through that? I mean, being so much.
Very carefully would be the best answer. Actually, what we've been doing is actually taking it out of the world of ChatGPT, and we're actually using something called Sheets GPTs. So in fact, we put all 2,000 ideas in the sheets, and then we evaluate them one by one, and then we give them a scoring in an external document. Does that make sense?
Going through 2000, how that takes forever, doesn't it?
No, it takes about 10 minutes.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh,
So basically, if you can imagine an Excel sheet with all your ideas listed here,
okay.
and then you have all your personas here, and then you have all your feedback, and then you do some little Excel wizardry, which is to divide the cells into columns like they should be. And now you have 10 reviews on validity, 10 reviews on novelty, and 10 comments on every idea that's there in the bunch.
I'm sorry, so you're saying that we use synthetic users or we use human judgment?
So this is with synthetic users, but you can actually ask the AI to create 10 synthetic users and get feedback from 10 of them at the same point in time. Does that make sense? I'll show you what I got here. Give me a second.
Right. So what I was wondering is it more of a human process or is it more of AI process?
The first part is very much an AI process because if you want to get your team to revolt, ask them to evaluate 2,000 ideas. It's just not going to happen.
Right.
But here, what you see is this is, for example, the feedback on one idea. So what we have is we have the purchase intent from a series of people. We have the novelty, we have surprise, and then we have all the feedback. And it does that, 2,000 times. And then you have this text, which is searchable, and it's pretty straightforward. It costs a little bit of money to do this, by the way, because you start using, especially if you're doing a ChatGPT 4, it might cost you $10 or something like that to go through and run the prompt, which is not a big deal if you're doing it as part of a sprint. But if you make it a publicly available thing online, then it can be quite expensive. Does this answer your question, Kai? So basically, you have your idea coming in, you have the AI evaluating the idea line by line, and then you structure it to come out with the results.
And the humans focus on the top ones, I suppose.
They focus on the top ones, but part of the treasure hunt is to find the ones that are, for example, the ones that are polarizing. So it's not because an idea has a bad score in average that it's a bad idea. Actually, what you're looking for is ideas that are actually really good and really bad. So something that a lot of people hate is oftentimes a really good idea.
Right. There's also a line with research that so highly novel ideas tend to have wider range of assessment.
So the risk here that you have is if you're just looking at averages, you're not going to find it. So that's why we give it as a treasure hunt to somebody and say, look, here's all the ideas, search within that and find 2 or 3 that you think are really cool. And you might disagree with what the AI is doing.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
So I'm going to give you guys a suggestion. So I sent you a link. This thing here, it's a step-by-step. What you'll get is you'll get around 80 on target ideas. You get feedback on those ideas, and you'll get ideas for business concept. All you have to do is you start out with an objective, and it'll take you through this step by step. It takes 20 minutes. You can go through it. It's quick. It's easy. You just have to copy paste things over to ChatGPT, and that's running 4 out of the 265 tools. Cool. That was it for me today, guys. Cool. I appreciate Rick. Thank you for the comments. Fritz, thank you for the comments. Kai, thank you for the comments. I'm feeling really stupid that I couldn't get the LinkedIn Live to work. And now I have to go back and apologize to a whole bunch of people. I'm looking at LinkedIn right now, and it's sort of burning up my LinkedIn right now saying, no, why couldn't I get into your meeting? But I figured it was better to just go with this and see how it comes out. So if you could, I would be really interested in getting your feedback. So if you fill in this thing here, the sprint feedback, it'd really help me in terms of figuring out where we go with this presentation. Okay. Thank you, guys. Cheers.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.